Hola. Hello, everyone. Let's start healing. I'm Adrianne Murchison, and thank you for coming to our Let's Start Healing podcast. It's so awesome to be talking to you right now. I have been wanting to do this for a long time. And I have to tell you, it's been heartening to hear people share with me how they really want to talk about God in a deep and genuine way. So guess what? That is what we're going to do here. We have guests from all walks of life, Christians and non-Christians, who are sharing their experiences with God, their spiritual path, how they connect with Him, their relationship with Him. And this is the crux, how they stay present with Him while navigating real life issues. Because, you know, that is the hard thing, at least for me. That can be tough. My mind will just go off. I'll get so absorbed in whatever I'm dealing with, and then I'll forget to just call on God, because that's what works for me personally. So I have to tell you straight out the gate, you will hear some things that are a little out of the box, but you can handle it. I know you can. And what I also know is that you're going to hear so many experiences that you relate to and that you find things that you have in common with. And that's what I found, that we have more in common than we think. And I know this sounds idealistic, but what we have in common can change the world. I see this in my personal and professional life, and it is one of the main reasons that I wanted to do this podcast. I'm in journalism, and I was struck 2 years ago after the presidential election when I was out and about, and there were so many people, and I even wrote about this, there were so many people that I encountered who really wanted to unite rather than be divisive and a part of the hostile climate that they felt was out here in our stratosphere. And they really wanted to get to know people who had different life experiences, people of different races that they hadn't tried to get to know before. They wanted to get to know people who don't necessarily believe the things that they believe. And so I found that really heartening at the time and even now. And then in my personal life, well, I live in Atlanta, Georgia, and for the last several years, I've been a part of a few different spiritual discussion groups. And these groups bring people together who are from all different walks of life, from all different faiths, all different ages, different races, and we come together and we get to know each other through the truth of who we are and not what we look like or what we do for a living or how much education we have had. So we bond in a natural way. And I'm thinking, this is going on widespread. This is not going on just in Atlanta. But we really don't see this represented in the media. We don't see people represented who want to get to know people who are not like them. So that's what we're going to do here with this platform. We are going to try to start healing through our spirituality. What do we have to lose? Let's put aside our divisiveness and our judgment, if only for a few minutes. Let's put aside our judgment of people who don't look like us, people who don't talk like us, people who don't believe what we believe. Because my feeling is, when we get down to the truth of who we are as individuals, we're really not that different. I have this guy friend that we've been friends for years, and so throughout the years, I would go to him with my relationship woes, and he would say to me, Adrianne, these guys put their pants on one leg at a time. And that's what I feel about all of us. We're all pretty much the same. We bleed the same. We hurt the same. We have the same joys and pains through love and loss. At one time or another, all of us have been awakened in the middle of the night by our troubles, and we start contemplating what we're going to do. All of us hurt when a loved one is hurting. So let's start healing already. My own spiritual journey is a winding one and something that I'm grateful for. I grew up Catholic, yet I've never really had a traditional mindset when it comes to God. I've always been close to God. I can remember being a very, very little girl and just loving to read our family Bible and look at the pictures. And I still am a soul that I take the love and only the love of God. I've never really been a person who believed in fearing God or the wrath of God. Not that I don't have fears, but my inner self has always had a deep knowing that for me, God is love and only love. And that no matter what, deep within me, I know no matter what, God loves all of us. I know that all of us are a wholly loved child of God. And even if there's someone that I despise because of some horrendous act that they committed, I know deep within me that God's love for this person never, ever diminishes. So my spiritual journey took a shift some years ago after my mother passed away. It was life-changing because my father had died some years earlier. And I felt when my mother was gone that the only way I could continue on was if I lived the most authentic life possible. And I really didn't feel I was doing that at that point. Even though I was still close to God, I didn't feel authentic in my skin, especially in my romantic relationships. And I felt if I'm going to go on without my mother, I want to live in an authentic way and I want to get to happy. And at that time, I had this book, A Course in Miracles. I had had it for about a year, but I hadn't really read it that much in depth. And it's not a book that you pick up and say, oh, I think this week I'm going to read and I'm going to start and finish A Course in Miracles. But I hadn't really gone too far into the book at that point. So I decided I was going to read more of it. And I got so deep into the book, it really, for me, affirmed everything I always felt about God's love exponentially. And so for me, this book tells the truth about God and this simple truth about God in very deep ways. It helps me to stay present in God when I practice what it says. And it helps me to remember that no matter what I think about myself, God thinks I'm perfect. God loves me to the utmost. And so if I can see myself in some way, the way that God sees me, then I can see my fellow man that way. I can go to work. I can go out into the world, and someone that might annoy me normally, I can go within myself and see that person as my brother. I can see the love and perfection in that person. That's what that book does for me. But another thing that fascinates me about the book is how it draws people from all different faiths, people who are not necessarily Christians at all. And that's so fascinating to me because the book is written in the voice of Jesus. But this podcast is not about A Course in Miracles. As I talk to people about their spiritual path, I will be sharing aspects of my own. But this podcast is about truly how we have more in common than we think. So let's start healing already. Really. Our first guest is a beautiful soul. She is a woman who really demonstrates my point about how we're all connected. She brings people together through an interfaith group of women of all different faiths and cultures. And she's been doing this for about 11 years. And that's only one aspect of her spiritual path. Well, let's get to know her. Let's get started. And let's start healing. Welcome, Parish Hattub. I'm so happy that you're here. Thank you so much for being here. You're so beautiful and wonderful inside and out.
My pleasure, my dear friend Adrianne. I always love the opportunity to talk about spirituality and how we live our lives through this spiritual journey of life. So thank you for having me.
Thank you, Parish. You know what? I think one of the first questions I want to ask you is if you are a seeker or a healer. And the reason that I like to ask that question is because I very much consider myself a seeker. And I was talking to another friend and she says, oh, no, for herself, she's very much a healer. And she is very much a healer because she's a practitioner, of massage and Thai yoga massage. And so she puts her hands on people and is actually healing people. Me, I just want to know God. That's why I love doing this podcast and I love talking to people like you, because the more I learn and talk to people like you and talk to people about their spiritual path, even if our paths aren't identical, it helps me to understand God because I know we're all one.
Absolutely.
So do you consider yourself a seeker or a healer or something else?
I consider myself, I think, a little bit of both. I think for me, they go hand in hand. Mm-hmm. I seek the love of God. I seek to be a better person every single day than the day before. And so I believe that if we want to have this connection with our Creator, I believe that part of that is the seeking, right? Seeking of God, seeking the truth, if you will, whatever it means to us in our lives. So the reason I say I'm a combination of both, so that applies to one aspect of my life. And the other aspect, the healing, I think that through my spiritual journey and seeking, the love of God, I have healed myself in so many ways. And not knowing, I've healed people that have been around me and come around me. And I feel like we're all almost like these hollow reeds, if you will, right? And the love of God, when we're seeking it and we're attracted to it, this love of God just flows through us.
Yes.
And so not only does it heal us, it heals whoever is in interaction and contact with us. So.
Yes. And, I don't know if I've told you this, actually. Well, Parish has a gratitude meditation circle. She has a women's interfaith group. And so I come to the gratitude meditation circle as often as I can. And one thing that I love when I know something is real, when I'm having a real experience, is I can feel the energy of God in the room. And that happens for me when I come and I do a meditation in your home within a circle of women. And I remember talking to another friend who comes to the group, Carla, and I remember saying, Parish is the real deal. I literally said that because I really feel God, within the space. And so I wonder if you could talk about the meditation circle and your inspiration for wanting to do that, because that kind of came up organically. I think maybe summer before last, you decided you wanted to do it. But then you also have your women's interfaith group. Are they one and the same? Can you talk about those two things?
Absolutely. So my Interfaith Women's group started 11 years ago, and it just came from the basic principles of the Baha'i faith, which is oneness. We celebrate diversity of religion, culture, race, because if you look within the Baha'i faith, diversity, elimination of prejudice, that's a huge principle for us. And so I've always been around such a diverse group of women just growing up. And so I figured, you know what, let me do something with this. I reached out to a group of my friends and I said, I want to start an Interfaith Women's group. And they said, well, what do you want to do with this group? Do you want to talk about men, our love lives? I said, no. I said, I really want to talk about our spiritual journey in life, and talk about spirituality and empowerment and inspiration, wellness, all those things that, bring us to what we are as women. And so probably about, I don't know, 8 or 9 women slowly became 30 and 30 grew the next year and the next year. And now we have a Facebook presence and we have reached almost 1,000 women, and the women are from around the world. And so through my interfaith group, the past 11 years, which we would meet once a month, and we would pray, and we would always have a topic which we would discuss, and we would always do charitable activities and have different charitable drives, came the idea of, okay, let me do a gratitude meditation circle, which started last year. And to be quite honest, it was supposed to be 4 weeks.
That's right. It was. That's right.
It was supposed to be 4 weeks.
I remember
only.
that.
And 4 weeks now, I believe it's God's blessing, it'll be a year, I believe, next month. And I realized the need for it because I remember when I said, okay, I want to commit to this meditation circle for 4 weeks. And the women in the group were like, oh, can we continue? And I said, why not? There was the need for it. That need was so in all of our lives at that time. And I continue to have the need. And I think all the other women in the group, because you're constantly growing through your spiritual journey. And so we get together once a week at my house and my home. As everyone says, isn't it hard doing this every single week? I'm like, it is such a blessing to open your home and to have women from different faiths and cultures come and be as one.
Yes.
And so it's such a big blessing for us. We do a meditation. Sometimes it's drumming. Sometimes it's bowls. And then we do prayers. And the prayers, I have interfaith prayer books so everyone can read from their religion or a different religion of choice, because I say prayer is prayer. It's conversation with God.
Right.
It doesn't matter what religion it's from. And then after that, we have fellowship, and sometimes we'll watch inspirational videos. And so it's really about connection.
It is.
And I think sometimes we've had discussions where, we have been vulnerable at times. And I think that's almost like a superpower. It's where your vulnerability is that those deep connections are made.
That's true. Because sometimes I know any one of us could just break out in tears, because I know I might just feel some presence within me that will bring me to tears.
Absolutely.
And I was mentioning one of the gatherings where there was a few women who didn't speak English, and there was still a connection. It's just very powerful. And you were saying that that's the power of oneness.
Absolutely. The power of oneness. And, we think sometimes, if I don't speak someone's language, how can I connect with them? Well, there's no language to the power of love.
Right.
And that's that, if we believe we are love
Right.
because we were created in the eyes of God and we are that essence of
Mm-hmm.
God,
Mm-hmm.
there should not be any language barriers. We always think we get sometimes intimidated when we might go out and someone doesn't speak the same language as we do. And we're like, how are we going to communicate with them? That comes
Exactly.
organically, and that comes from that love that, we connect with another human being.
Exactly. I mean, if you think about it, I mean, words are just sounds. So,
Absolutely.
I mean, we get so used to, what words represent, but they're really just sounds, and we're really connecting by spirit and eyes and touch and, you know,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. So true.
Yeah. And so offline, you were saying that you're not one who really watches the news, and you made a decision that you didn't want to bring in that energy and the negative energy, I should say. And yet, when there's in the past, I can remember when there's been a tragedy where you wanted to have a few people over to pray and send out healing to the world. Can you talk about that and that dynamic, and how do you learn about what's going on, and why is it important, do you think, and why is it true that a few people can sit and pray and maybe create some kind of healing around something that's happened on the other side of the world or 800 miles away? Can you talk about that?
Absolutely. And we kind of, it's not really a rule. My husband and I were mindful of, okay, let's not watch the news. The reason being, every time we would turn on the news, it would make me frustrated, and sometimes I would just be like so angry about certain things that were happening, the injustice in the world. And basically, I would just break down. I felt like my energy and my spirit was breaking down because I felt, oh my God, hopeless, because you see all these different injustices and tragedies happening. So I just decided a year ago, I said, you know what? I just want to always be a servant of God and come from a place of love, compassion, and service in order for me to live my life with these qualities. I have to see what can I do to bring out these qualities because being mindful of what I hear, of what I read is
Mm-hmm.
extremely important to me to conserve my energy. And, every morning when I wake up, I have my quiet time of meditation and devotion. And so I'm taking that vibration throughout the day. And when I step out, I say, you know what? Every single person I come out and interact with, I just want to be a servant of God.
Right.
How can I be an expression of that, right? And so, even playing soft music in the morning, really sets the tone of what you want to carry out throughout the
Yes.
day. So, what I see happening is, well, people are turning on the news first thing in the morning. They're frustrated. We're so divided as a country now. So they're taking that frustration and it kind of carries out with them throughout the rest of the day. So again, the question is what I am doing or what I am reading, is it adding to the betterment of the world? Is it adding to the betterment of who I am? Is it improving me as an individual? How can I strive to be better than I was yesterday? Or, am I just going to be consumed with all the media? Because media never really, I feel like media is so biased, right?
Yes.
And so sometimes we don't watch or listen to the good stories because that's not what makes media,
Right.
right? And so, again, to have that connection with my divine source, I choose to create my own environment, again, of what I read and what I watch. And when someone says, well, you don't know what's going on, I'm like, I have so many women in my life. Trust me, I'm getting some kind of news from this one
Right.
or that one. And just being out, being out in the workforce and just being out interacting with people, it's not like you're completely clueless. You know what you need to know,
Right,
right?
right. And even if we're not like we're talking about media, but um when you mentioned meditating in the morning or praying in the morning, or what your practice in the morning of what you do to get centered, with God, I think is so important and powerful. If you want the peace of God, you have to make time for the peace of God.
Absolutely.
And so I think that's just so powerful what you said about, because it sets your intention for the day. I mean, we don't know what the
Yes.
day holds,
Right.
but it sets your intention to go out in the world in peace
Absolutely.
rather than going out in the world bewildered and uncertain about what the unknown is, in fear of the unknown. It's kind of like we're armed with grace in a way.
Right. And I have people that I come in contact with, and we talk about our morning ritual. What are you doing in the morning to set the intention of the day? And they say the same thing as what you mentioned. Your friend says, I don't have time. I'm busy. I got to get to work. There's 24 hours in a day. Can we not dedicate 10, 15 minutes to God
Right.
out of 24 hours?
Right.
And, without any judgment, that there's 24 hours in a day. If we
Right.
cannot dedicate 10, 15 minutes out of 24 hours to our creator, then we might need to just have better time management skills,
Right.
and say, okay, you know what, maybe I shouldn't be doing this and be dedicating this time, to God.
Right.
And then what's interesting is when you do dedicate that time, and I've seen there's been days I might have been in a rush and I did not get to do my morning meditation and prayers. My day
Is different.
completely is different than the days that I have spent that time in prayer, because there's this, I want to say, there's this almost like this armor of protection, right? You feel like, okay, I've connected with God. Nothing is going to, nothing's going to hurt me today because I have this armor of protection, his
Exactly.
mercy and grace
Exactly.
over me. And so there's just this confidence that I think when you deal with work, family, relationships, whatever, that, you know what, I've done my time. I've communicated with my creator today. I know he has me covered in this situation.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. Can you talk a little bit about the Baha'i faith? I know a lot of people have heard of it, but they may not know what it is, and how it may be, what people of other faiths may have in common with Baha'i.
Absolutely. So the Baha'i faith started in 1844 in Iran, and Baha'is believe in what we call progressive revelation. And so, if you will, we believe that there's God, and God has sent different manifestations or prophets, whichever one you'd like to call, from Zoroaster to Buddha to Moses to Muhammad, to Jesus. And the newest one, which we believe, is Baha'u'llah. Baha'u'llah means the glory of God. And so Baha'is believe every so many thousands of years, God sends a new manifestation or prophet. And the reason is each teaching that each prophet has brought is a different teaching for that time, because humanity grows, right? So the teachings, for example, of Muhammad, when he came and said, oh, you may marry more than one wife, you may have multiple wives. The reason Muhammad came with that teaching at that time is because the women were being slaughtered at that time. So that teaching applied to that time.
Okay.
Okay. So we do believe that every single prophet coming from God has equal station. We don't believe one is better than the other. So we believe Buddha, Muhammad, Moses, Jesus Christ, they are all equal stations from this divine source, which we call God, and Baha'u'llah, which is the manifestation for today, which the teachings that he has brought, some of the Baha'i principles that he has brought, is the equality of men and women. That is one of our principles. Elimination of all prejudice, equality of science and religion. They have to balance. Investigation of truth. We need to have a universal language. So these are just some of the Baha'i teachings that Baha'u'llah has brought for the betterment of humanity. And if you look at humanity today, the teachings, the Baha'i teachings, for example, elimination of prejudice. You see what's going on around the world, what's going on in our country, the equality of men and women.
Right. That's really striking me.
Yeah.
The men and
so
women.
these are our teachings. There's 12 principles of the Baha'i faith, and these are several of the teachings of the Baha'i faith. And, we don't have clergy in the Baha'i faith. And the reason we don't have clergy is because we believe, again, there was a time for clergy because there was only certain men in a town or a village at that time that would be able to translate holy books, right? The time of Jesus, right? So, clergy had to be set up because there was only, the learner that were able to communicate the teachings of Jesus to, people in different towns and villages, if you will. And, in the Baha'i faith, we believe it's between you and God. So when you hear something, there is this, I would say, there's this responsibility on you as an individual to investigate that truth, to see, is that the truth? Not to always necessarily believe everything that you're told. So there's that investigation of truth. And so we have Baha'i assemblies and communities around the world, which they handle the administration of the Baha'i faith. We have Baha'i centers around the world, and we have Baha'i temples around the world. So there is the structure to it. But we don't have clergy where you go and, talk to a clergyman. But we have, for example, we have a local Baha'i spiritual assembly, and we have a national Baha'i spiritual assembly, which those are elected. Let's say I live in Roswell. The Roswell Baha'is, they elect, this is in secret ballot. You're not allowed to, basically, it's all secret ballot. So it's very spiritual. It's a very spiritual process. You pray and you elect 9 people that you think would be, willing to serve on this assembly, if you will, of that certain area. Okay. So if there's any problems or if there's any assistance that you need in your life, you go to the Baha'i assembly of that community.
Do they work together?
They do work together. They work together as an assembly. And so the assembly, usually if there's decisions or whatever has to be made, they consult and then they come to a decision as one body. If you
How
will.
long do they serve?
They serve for 1 year. And so each year there is basically elections of an assembly, right? And then there's a National Spiritual Assembly, which for the United States, it's in Chicago. And then there's an international, which we call it the Universal House of Justice. It's in Haifa, Israel, because that's the Holy Land for Baha'is around the world. And so 9 members are elected to serve at the Universal House of Justice. And so there's different levels of assemblies. And so, again, we believe that religion is an individual decision, right? And there's not clergy involved, to tell you have to confess because, at the end of the day, we talk to God.
Yes.
And he's the one that's the all forgiving and all of our shortcomings, right? Because there's no such thing as a perfect human being.
Right. And, as you're talking, I'm thinking about relationship with God. I mean, it sounds like that's very much what you're talking about. I think when I think about traditional religion versus, I don't know what to call it, but a spiritual path that many people may have, a traditional religion may have a lot of rules that may not, this is all my opinion, that may not allow for a relationship with God.
Right.
And so that's what it sounds like. A relationship is what is allowed or is made way for with the things that you're describing in the Baha'i faith.
Yeah. And I remember when my husband and I first met, he was not raised Baha'i. He became a Baha'i after his investigation. And he said, it's really interesting. He said, the way you look at God is you're not looking at God from a fear-based perspective. Okay. You're looking at God as this all embracing source of love, right? The all forgiving. And so that was kind of his doorway to, okay, let me search this faith to see if it's the right thing for me. And I think that's the one beautiful thing about the Baha'i faith, is that, you know what, it is individual religion, individual between you and your creator. And you don't have clergy, right? We have thousands and thousands of books that have been written from, our prophet founder Baha'u'llah. And so there's so many writings, and they're translated in over, I believe it's 85 languages. And so we have these beautiful sacred writings that we can, connect with. And we have beautiful prayers that have been written for us. There is actually, I don't know the exact number, but I want to say a little bit over 6 million Baha'is around the world. And so it's the second most world spread religion in the world. Most people don't realize that. But it's like, if I look at myself as a world citizen, right? Instead of saying I'm an American citizen, I look at myself as a world citizen, and the world is my country, which that is what Baha'u'llah has said. Remove the boundaries.
That's beautiful.
Okay. The world is one big country.
Yes.
And so I never have this fear of, oh my God, if I go to the other side of the world, I don't know anyone. I just look up, find my Baha'i community, and I have this instant family because I know my Baha'i community, they have the same beliefs.
And they're going to be accepting of you.
Absolutely.
Wow.
So it's a beautiful thing. One of my sisters lives in China. My other sister lives in Spain. And when they moved to different parts of the world, everyone was like, oh my God, but you don't know anyone in those parts of the world. They said, well, we're just going to find our Baha'i community in those areas. And so it is this beautiful belief that, you know what, we are world citizens. We're all world citizens.
Absolutely.
Not just me. We're all world citizens, right? And when we have that belief that there's no citizenship between this or that. We're just all human beings in this beautiful journey of life.
This is so enlightening to me, because I really feel that, and I had no idea that there was a faith that spoke to that. So that's really beautiful. So was there any shift that you had in your life that, I know you were born into the Baha'i faith, but was there anything that shifted in your life that made you who you are today spiritually? Or was it simply just an evolution of life?
Well, of course, I was born into a Baha'i family, but, it wasn't like my parents were like, okay, you have to be a Baha'i. At the age of 15 in the Baha'i faith, you can declare and say, I'm a Baha'i and I follow the Baha'i principles and I believe in the principles of Baha'u'llah, or you choose a different path, and that's perfectly fine too. And so I think as a young woman, my faith really became important to me when I went through a divorce. I was a single mom with two young kids. My daughter was 1.5 years and my son was 6 months old. And I was in a situation that I needed to get out. And so it was so easy at that point in my life, with my challenges and struggles as a single mom, to turn to different things. But I prayed harder than I ever have prayed in my life during those challenging times that I had. And I saw the miracle behind prayers for me. And so I always, always, always believe that prayer is such a powerful tool. We just have to believe in it. And so, through my prayers, through the miracles that, manifested in my life, I realized that my faith was really, at that point in my life, outside of my kids, it was the most important thing that I had. And it just, I was very vulnerable, and I realized that, the more I felt this connection to God, the stronger I felt to be able to get through these, tribulations, and test. And, I felt this just, I can't even really put it into word. You almost feel like you have this armor of protection over you, right? And you know what? I know God only wants the best for me. And even though I don't see what's happening at that present time to
Right.
be a blessing, but when you have that faith and you see those miracles, those slow miracles happening in your life on a daily basis, and say, you know what, God, I trust you. I believe you that even if though right now I don't understand what's going on, I believe that you just want the best for me and you're just patient and detached from what you want. Because sometimes we have this belief that, oh, this is what I want. But when we pray, we should also, I believe, pray for detachment. God, please let me be detached from the desires of my heart and what your will is for me.
Yes.
And so my faith became stronger and stronger. And, but, I always say that I feel like every single day, I just want to be a better version of what I was yesterday. And I feel like, if I have this openness every single day to learn whatever the test is in that day for me from our beloved source, I believe that's part of my spiritual journey, right? Becoming more connected, and ego is like one of those things that sometimes we think we know it all, but you know what? Life is just a long journey of learning until
Yes,
the
it is.
day we die, or I
Yeah.
should say transition.
Yes, it is. And so, how do you? I know you have two young adults, children, and you have a younger daughter, and so I know they're just absorbing. Both you and your husband, I know they're just absorbing all of this, which is so awesome. What is it that you hope that they take away from who you are spiritually?
Oh, wow. And I sometimes get emotional just talking about this. I just, my three children are just, they're my world. And my two older kids, which are in college now, I've always told them growing up, and, ever since they were probably 6, 7 years old, we would go to Must Ministries homeless shelter. And that was really important for me, for them to understand what a life of service means. And when I mean a life of service means being a servant of God, outside of our occupations. So
Right.
just growing up, they would always be involved with serving at the homeless shelter, being part of different fundraisers, raising money for different charities. And so to me, the most important thing, sometimes we want like education to be the most important thing, which is extremely important. Don't get me wrong, because, we've always emphasized education. But outside of that, just being a good human being. I've always told my kids, it doesn't matter what you decide to do in life, treat every single human being with kindness and respect and generosity and justice. And I do believe my daughter, she's 21. She's an ambassador for St. Jude's Children's Hospital. And so I'm so proud of her, because that's her way of service,
Right.
to help children with cancer. And my son, he is, in whatever capacity he can help out, he's always been that example of equality and justice. Whenever he has seen anything that does not stand for justice, he's always been that voice. So I've always told them, sometimes when we are just bystanders
Yes.
and we don't have a voice, I tell them it's just as bad as participating in whatever that injustice
Absolutely.
is. So we have to speak up and be that voice of justice and equality for all people. And I see both of them now as being young adults, being examples of that in their life on their college campuses. And my 11-year-old, she's just, she has her little sister circle group,
Yes.
which, it's all about empowerment of young girls. And, she's a whole different story. She wants to make her own YouTube channel one day. So I won't even get into
Right.
her, but it's really about, kindness. What does kindness look like? We sometimes forget to talk about kindness and how important
Yes,
that
that's
is,
so true.
So I've told my kids at the end of the day, the most important thing to me that I want from you is kindness towards all humanity. And I think they're doing a pretty good job.
Well, before we close, I wanted to ask you if you could just briefly talk about some of your travels because I see, you travel the world and, I know you went to Bali not that long ago. And I know it seemed like that was a family event, but it just looked so incredible, as if it was an uplifting spiritual experience. And you were in Sedona recently, and even here in Georgia, sometimes you go to the mountains and hold retreats there. And so if you could just speak to some of the travels and how why they're important spiritually in terms of some of the places that you've been to.
Absolutely. I believe that traveling, especially if we have the opportunity to travel around the world, just opens our mind, right? I always tell my kids, I remember growing up, like the world is not our backyard. The world is not Roswell, Georgia. There's this big, beautiful world out there. And I want to be able to be in situations where I get to witness
Yes.
different cultures, witness different religions, to see how they worship. Yeah, so we had our family reunion in Bali last summer. And in one word to talk about the experience, it was just mind blowing. So Bali is a province of Indonesia. And so just right outside of it, there is an island called Lombok. And Lombok is mostly Muslim. So on this small island, you have over 1,000 mosques. And it's just incredible because although you don't understand, the chants, wherever you are in your day of sightseeing, you know, you just hear this time for prayer through the intercoms from the mosques. So, like I said, there's over 1,000 mosques in Lombok. And so, just being mindful for the fact that these people are taking time throughout their day for prayer. And I believe it's 5 times a day that they are doing this. So, and this is throughout their workday that they're doing this. It's like, you know what? We can't spend 10 minutes talking to God, and these people are spending 5 times a day going to the mosque and chanting. And that's why it's such a spiritual place, because whatever you are doing, taking that time out for prayer is so important to them. And, it was really, I remember when my husband and I were there with our daughters, it was like, okay, you know what? We need to be accountable for that time that we spent in conversation with God while we were there. And then when we were, back in Bali, the majority in Bali is Hindu. It's about, I want to say 85% in Bali that they are Hindu, and to see that beautiful culture of the temples and the different gods that they have, and the beautiful, they have what they call offerings outside of their homes and restaurants and streets. And they are kind of like altars, if you will. So it's just different spiritual elements which they are putting on this offering, and to have the incense sticks all throughout the streets and restaurants and throughout their homes. It's really having, I almost feel like accountability for who you are as a person. And so that's why I think Bali is such a spiritual place, because whether you go to Lombok, which is mostly Muslim, or Bali, which is Ubud, which is mostly Hindu, to see the beautiful diversity of these two different religions come together. And although, they have completely different rituals, there is that mutual respect that, I respect you for what you believe in. And, there is that respect that you see, although they have their different, temples and mosques. And, I think when we were there, it was such an awakening for me in my spirituality, because I had to do a self-check that, am I being mindful throughout the day of my connection to God? And I think that's why people go to Bali, because they're in search of this spiritual journey. But again, sometimes I say to my kids, when we go on these spiritual journeys, it's really for the betterment of our spiritual growth. And what do we walk away with? It's not just about the food and the places we see, but it's that spiritual growth that really, grows inside us, that how can I be a better version of myself, just by what my world travels have taught me is, we're all world citizens, right?
Sounds powerful.
Yes, it was. And the mountains, you ask about the mountains. I feel so connected to God when I'm in the mountains.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like when we are in nature,
Yes.
that is connection with God. And so I love going to the mountains. I've done several women's retreats in the North Georgia mountains, because I think that's a great place to get grounded and to connect. And then you asked about Sedona. Oh my God, if you have not gone to Sedona,
I can see.
it's
oh
like,
my goodness.
oh God, there's no words to even talk about Sedona. Sedona is this beautiful spiritual Mecca, if you will, I think, of, North America.
In Arizona.
In Arizona, yes. And from the red rocks to the vortexes of Sedona, it's powerful. I mean, you just go and sit in the different vortexes, or not even the vortexes, just to be in that space of the red rocks.
Mm-hmm.
You just see, when you look around you, you see the vast, just the mountains the way they are, and the formation of the different rocks. And you see that, I'm just this tiny little seed in this big universe, right? So that's why, Sedona, when I go there, I'm like, my problems aren't really even problems, because I'm like this tiny little seed in this beautiful universe of God. And, people there, I feel like, people go there for spiritual healing, because there's a lot of different healers that attend there. There's the crystals, there's the mindfulness, there's the meditation there. So I feel like most people go there for the intention of healing, which is amazing, but also that that healing that we sometimes seek in our life can take place in our very own home, right? We don't have to travel the world or go to Sedona. That healing can take place in our own home, with what we do in our own home to create that space of healing for ourselves.
It can. You are so awesome. You are so awesome. Well, first, I want to say that I'm afraid I might have mispronounced your last name when we started, and it's Parish Hattub.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes.
And if someone wanted to get in touch with you, could they send you a message through Facebook, through the Interfaith group through Facebook? Could they just send an IM? Or?
Absolutely. They can reach me through on Facebook. I have International Interfaith Women's Group. I'm on Facebook. On Facebook, though, I have my maiden last name before my last name, so I'm under Parish Hattub. Or they can email me, and my email address is vintageparish, PARISH @gmail.com. So I love to have spiritual conversations with everyone, and whenever there's that opportunity to sit down and talk about spirituality, I love that. And I would love if I could close, if I may, with a prayer.
Yes, and we were both going to say a prayer from your
wonderful.
You have different booklets, And are these from the Baha'i faith, the Baha'i prayers?
Absolutely.
And
These are Baha'i prayers.
So I had found one also. I found a short one also.
Okay. So we have prayers for different, spiritual qualities, if you will. Prayers for healing, forgiveness, protection, for mothers, for children, for the departed. So I wanted to say a prayer, and this prayer is one of my favorite prayers. It's on cultivating spiritual qualities within us. And this is the prayer. O God, refresh and gladden my spirit, purify my heart, illumine my powers. I lay all my affairs in thy hand. Thou art my guide and my refuge. I will no longer be sorrowful and grieved. I will be a happy and joyful being. O God, I will no longer be full of anxiety, nor will I let trouble harass me. I will not dwell on the unpleasant things of life. O God, thou art more friend to me than I am to myself. I dedicate myself to thee, O Lord.
That's so beautiful. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. And this is from Peace, a booklet of peace. And again, this is from the Baha'i faith. Yes?
Yes.
Okay. It is most certain that if human souls exercise their respective reason and intelligence upon the divine questions, the power of God will dispel every difficulty, and the eternal realities will appear as one light, one truth, one love, one God, and a peace that is universal. Amen. And thank you so much, Parish.
Oh, thank you.
You're so wonderful.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about the Baha'i faith.
Oh, it's been incredible.
And there is a website if anyone would like to, know more about the Baha'i faith. It's BahaiFaith.org. And it's a wonderful website that any information or questions that you might have, you can go to that website. Again, it's BahaiFaith.org.
Thank you so much, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Let's start healing.